So I re-recorded this video like 5 times now, because every time I think I've said everything I want to say, something else comes up or I run into something else that's wrong, and it doesn't stop. I started recording this review 2 months ago. How does it take this long? Alright, so let me get real with you here for a second. I've said it before in previous videos, and I'm gonna say it again. I love Harley Benton guitars. I really do. With the price of guitars steadily going up over the past 10 to 15 years to the point where even entry-level guitars aren't really budget anymore, Harley Benton has become synonymous with an affordable, reasonable quality instrument. However, over the past year or so, I've noticed that the quality of the Harley Benton guitars I've been receiving has started to decline. Things started off great with the ST20, and the nut aside, it's a fantastic guitar that I still use on a very regular basis. Following that was the R446, which had a couple of minor hardware issues, at least for my taste, but it was still a great instrument that came at an affordable price, and I would have had no problem continuing to use it for the work that I do here. After that though, things went downhill pretty fast, starting with a Fusion model that I ordered to review one of the roasted neck models. It was an absolute mess. There was a significant bow in the neck, the frets needed polished badly, the fingerboard was frankly disgusting and desperately in need of a cleaning, and the kicker of it all, there was impact cracking around the tone pot. I thought, okay, whatever. You know, it's just one lemon. I'm fine with that. I'll send it back, I'll get my money back, and I'll end up picking up another guitar. After that, I ordered a TE62, which had completely dead electronics upon arrival, and later I ordered a CST24, which had a pickup switch that gave out maybe 10 minutes into demoing the guitar. As if that wasn't enough, I ordered a 5-string bass along with that so I could have some good low end to record with, and the neck on it was horribly warped to the point where it was just unplayable after a certain point. But that wasn't going to stop me from bringing you the information that I know you want to see. And it was only a matter of time before I reviewed these things back here. Enter the JA-20 and the Victory Active, the new edition counterparts to the ST20 that I have raved about so much on the channel. When they were first announced, there was plenty of buzz about these guitars and a lot of excitement for additional body shapes with affordable active pickups. Well, turns out when these guitars started getting to the hands of players, they still had plenty of buzz about them. Quite literally.
Okay, this is normal. That's not normal.
In the days and weeks following their release, it was discovered by players that both the JA-20 and the Victory Active models had a very serious grounding issue that was coming directly from the factory. It turns out in manufacturing that the bridges that were being used were completely covered in non-conductive paint with no additional area stripped away to provide an actually good grounding connection. This caused the guitars to buzz not from the pickups, but from the strings themselves. Glenn Fricker over at Spectre Sound Studios did reviews of both guitars and also did a video showing how to alleviate the grounding issue. But it still raises the question, after 2 months, have Harley Benton and Thomann caught on to the issue and decided to tackle it at the source? It's been about 2 months since the launch of these two guitars. And while I had an original JA-20 here that I did all of my initial demoing and recording with, I decided to sell that guitar and buy brand new copies of the JA-20 and Victory Active, which I have here in the studio right now for the sake of this review. So in this video, I'm going to be taking a look at both the JA-20 and the Victory Active, mainly looking to see if the grounding issue has been resolved, but more importantly to let you know if they're worthwhile guitars otherwise. As always, we're going to go over all the specs of the guitars, I'm going to offer you sound demos for everything that you're going to want to hear, let you know the strengths and weaknesses of both guitars, and let you know anything that I would personally change about them. But enough about that. Let's go ahead and jump right into our deep dive of both the JA-20 and the Victory Active models. Alright, so here we are with the JA-20 Active. Now, this time around we're going to do things a little bit differently. I'm not going to have a face cam up that I'm going to be talking into, so all of the video footage you're going to see is just going to be focused on the guitar, which I have to admit looks fantastic. This is everything that I would have hoped for with the Jim Root style Jazzmaster. It's got this fantastic blacked out look. The lack of any inlays on the fingerboard helps add to that awesome aesthetic. Everything is placed fantastically on the guitar. It's got these nice sleek lines, these nice ever so slightly rounded corners that give it a little bit of smoothness to all this aggression, and it looks exactly like you would expect a big chunky heavy metal guitar to. Because it's from the same line of guitars as the ST20 Active, all of the specs are functionally the same, so I'm not going to spend as much time on all those details as I did in the ST20 Active video. Starting with the body, is of course made out of poplar, which is a very popular choice for these budget guitars with Harley Benton. It feels really nice. It is a little neck heavy when you're sitting down just because of the shape of the body, but it balances really well on a strap. It's nice and sleek and it looks good. The satin finish is solid. I don't really have any runs or signs of wear in it. It does of course feel a little on the soft side, which isn't too much of a surprise, but it's shaped very nicely. You got the nice back contour here, you got the nice arm scoop. The neck of the guitar is made out of maple and it is finished in the same satin black as the rest of the guitar. Feels pretty good. Of course, it's a bolt-on, so you got this big old square traditional neck heel right here. Compared to the ST20 Active though, it is a little bit thicker in profile, which I actually kind of welcome for a guitar like this. The ST20 Active didn't have an uncomfortable neck whatsoever, but having a little more substance, especially up here at the nut when you're really kind of digging in with the chunky riffy stuff, is great to have. The fretboard is made out of roseacre, which I have discussed in previous videos. It's one of those Sites Regulations woods, a rosewood replacement, and I am convinced that all of those replacements are just always going to end up dry. this fretboard, when I got it, it needed treatment. It still needs treatment because if you can see, it is still kind of on the dry side, but it's a fine replacement. Not having any dot inlays, as I previously mentioned, is very welcome, and it adds to the more menacing kind of blackout look on the guitar. As the rest of the neck goes, it's 22 frets, 25.5-inch scale length, and the frets on this one are just okay. Like, they're not cut into your hand sharp, but they definitely need some filing. I've got one right back here that's a bit on the rough side. There. Oh, yep, I got one right here at the 12th fret that could definitely use some filing. So, they're not terrible, but it's definitely a fret job that I recommend taking to a luthier or someone who knows what they're doing if you're a stickler for that kind of rounded edge thing. At the top of the headstock, of course, we have our standard 6 die-cast tuners. They're not locking, they're not name brand, they're not anything fancy, but they hold perfectly fine. There is a little bit of play to them when I start either tuning up or down, so that's just a tolerance kind of thing. You know, if it's that big of an issue, replace them with some Grovers or Godos or whatever you want. But if you're not too much of a stickler, they're perfectly fine. The plastic nut here is perfectly fine as well. It's cut pretty evenly, there's not any sharp edges. All the strings fit in there perfectly fine, and I haven't had any slipping issues, so you know what? That's a reasonable enough positive for this guitar, and I'll take that. Down here at the bridge we have, of course, our favorite Hipshot style string through hardtail bridge. And I swear I'm not going to be able to avoid this. I have the next 3 reviews already lined up here for the channel, and they all use this exact same style bridge. I'm not going to be able to stop talking about it. But it's exactly what you would expect if you've seen previous reviews. There's no sharp edges, nice and smooth, very comfortable to use, feels very sturdy. As far as electronics go, it's a simple control scheme, exactly what you would expect out of a Jim Root styled guitar, which is a single volume knob right here, and a simple 3-way toggle switch, which is located here on the upper horn. I don't know what pickup switch they decided to use in this guitar, but just listen to this. You hear that? This switch is fantastic. I've had this same kind of toggle switch on several Harley Benton guitars in the past, and none of them felt as good or as satisfying as this. There usually tends to be some looseness and some play in those kind of switches, and they just end up feeling mushy after a point of using them. But this switch is just awesome. It's very satisfyingly switched between positions. You get that big, loud, audible click, so you know when you're in the right spot. This pickup switch is awesome. If I could give it bonus points just for this, I absolutely would. This guitar is equipped with a pair of HBZ active humbuckers, the same that come in the ST20 Active, and a number of other budget-oriented, active-equipped Harley Benton guitars. For what it's worth, they sound perfectly good when you're playing. They're a little on the dark side, so you have to be careful with how you tune the low mids, but they've got plenty of volume, so you're definitely going to be pushing the preamp of either your amplifier or your interface. They're very evenly toned, nice and balanced up and down the neck. The bridge is plenty aggressive enough, even when you tune nice and low. The neck has some round kind of smoothness to it. I have had absolutely no complaints recording with these in the past, and I actually have to admit, I kind of like them for budget pickups. And lastly, we have the back of the guitar, which is even more devoid than normal. Just 6 string-through ferrules and a 9-volt battery compartment. There's not even an electronics plate back here because everything is hosted under the slightly custom-shaped pickguard. I do worry that if you're looking for a replacement on this guitar, you might actually have to get it custom machined. It's a little bit unfortunate with the shape of it. It's a very solid package overall in spite of its flaws, and I think there's a lot still like here. Alright, so now I'm here with the Victory Active, which is very obviously a V-shaped style guitar. It's got these extra little kind of horns here on the bottom to give it a little bit more aggressive of a look, and this is common among the Victory line. Honestly, not really a fan of these extra additions, I'm not gonna lie. They limit the amount of space you've actually got for the V to sit here in between your legs, and it's so small that it actually kind of pinches my legs a little bit. As far as specs go, this guitar has more in common with the rest of the Victory line than it does the Budget Active line. Both the body and the neck of the guitar are made out of mahogany, and as you would expect out of a Flying V, let me go ahead and pop the strap off here. It is a set neck construction. There's a tiny little space right here where the body is a little bit thicker than the neck. Upper fret access is a little bit more limited, but that's more so because of the shape of the body than it is the way the neck is set in there. It's just a concession you have to make with playing a Flying V. Slightly thicker profile than both the JA and ST20. It's got some more meat to it, so when you're doing that really low tune riffing right there, or if you're doing, you know, a whole lot of power chords, classic rock sort of riffs, you've got a whole lot of substance in there with you. Tapers off nicely up near the neck, and you know, when you're doing the high fret stuff, because of the thickness of the body, there's a whole lot to hold on to here. The neck of the guitar has a 24 3/4 inch scale length, which is not only the Les Paul scale, but is the same scale that a lot of traditionally shaped Flying Vs tend to have. And it makes the playing a little bit slinkier on the guitar, but all things considered, I'm impressed with how well it's managed to handle lower tunings, even with the stock strings. I have this guitar down 1.5 steps, which you heard during the demo track. And it doesn't feel overly floppy or like I can bend the strings way too far. The fingerboard, on the other hand, I'm not so sure about, and that's because the website has it listed as rosewood. But based on the way it feels, the dryness when it arrived, and the tiny bits of actual wood color I can see through the stain, I think it's also a roseacre fretboard just like the rest of the line. Honestly, it's not going to matter either way. You're going to have to condition the fretboard if you want to have that nice glassy feel, but it feels perfectly fine otherwise. Of course, the other significant difference in the guitar is the choice of bridge. as opposed to using the Hipshot style string through bridge, they've opted to stay in line with the rest of the Victory guitars and use a two-piece Tune-o-matic style bridge. Honestly, for a shape like this, I think it makes perfect sense. I would rather have a Tune-o-matic style on a more vintage shaped Flying V than I would something more modern like a string through or more commonly a Floyd Rose. And it's perfectly comfortable as it is. Quality isn't quite as good as that Hipshot style bridge, and that's a pretty significant bar to me. But it's easily adjustable. There aren't really any sharp edges or burrs on it. It's been perfectly easy to work with, and I was able to get the action pretty comfortable just with a couple of quick adjustments here on the bridge. Since the guitar doesn't have a full body pickguard to it, each of the pickups has its own individual route and it's sitting in a pickup ring on top of the guitar. I find that they're pretty reasonably set straight from the factory. The neck pickup is almost perfectly flush with the top of the fretboard right here. And it's nicely balanced with the bridge pickup, which sits a little bit higher, exactly as it should. If you're not used to adjusting pickups in this way, just be careful with how high you raise them, because it's really easy to just, dig in with some really heavy mutes, and if you've got the pickup too high, it's really easy to just fret it out against that bridge pickup. But they sit really nicely, and I find them easier to adjust or replace if that's what you choose to do than the ones on the JA and the ST, because you have to do less work in order to remove them and the electronics accordingly. All of the electronics, speaking of those, are recessed into this pickguard here. Same deal, single volume knob and the three-way switch. It brings together the whole package nicely, and it's fitting for a Flying V. Lastly, let's take one more look at the back of the guitar. 9-volt battery cavity, and nothing else on the back because you don't need any string-through ferrules or routing for the bridge since it just sits on top. Unfortunately, there's no comfort cuts either, so you don't have, a tummy cut up here on the back. What we do have is, let me see if I can get in the camera, it's really kind of hard to see. We've got the jack recessed right here, and it's using a Strat-style jack, which is really nice. Where the cable sits is very comfortable, leans up, just like directly against your leg, so you're not going to have the cable sitting in an awkward way where you might end up breaking that connection or having it pop out. It's a nice choice to add some variety to this budget active line. While they certainly could have stuck with the Jim Root style bodies, and they could have just gone with adding a telly to the line, going with the Flying V gives them something a little bit different. And if you're a fan of those Flying V slinging heavy metal kind of bands, whether it's something classic like the Michael Schenker Group or something really contemporary and heavy like Machine Head, you've got the entire look. You've got the sound from the active pickups, and you've got a nice and solid package, all things considered. So we've taken a look at the specs of the guitars, and I'm very pleased with what I received in the mail, but we haven't answered the all-important question yet. Has the grounding issue actually been resolved? Well, worry no longer, I've got you covered. You didn't think I was going to get through this whole video and not talk about that, did you? Here I am with the Victory Active. We're going to go ahead and start with this guitar. I currently have it plugged in to my audio interface. Gain is about 12 o'clock. And open on the screen right now is the plugin that I use for most of my rhythm guitar tracking. This is Neural DSP's Archetype Gojira, open to one of my favorite presets to use, which is Junkie for the Chunky. Okay, maybe not as chunky as I usually record with on the Flying V, but you kind of get the idea. Yeah. So there's a pretty decent amount of gain on this preset, and in order to offset that, there is a noise gate activated straight off the top. And the only way we're going to know if there's any kind of buzz, hum, or ground noise is by killing that noise gate. So let's go ahead and peel that completely off. So this is what the guitar sounds like going directly into this amp sim, and I'm not hearing any buzz or any ground noise whatsoever. So let's go on ahead and let's just do some tests really quick. Let's go ahead, fingers on the strings. Gonna start up at the top of the nut so that way strings aren't ringing out. I'm not hearing anything, any pops, any buzz anywhere. All right, fingers on the bridge. No buzzing or popping of any kind. Let's go ahead, switch the pickups and do the same thing. I'm hearing a whole lot of nothing as far as noise goes from this guitar, so it appears that it's actually properly grounded. There is a way really quick that we can test and see though, and that's by taking this overdrive pedal and cranking it all the way up. So we are pumping as much gain as possible into this guitar right now, and I'm still not hearing any kind of buzzing. I'm hearing what appears to be smoke and string noise, just as I move around. That's about it. Hands on the strings. I'm not hearing any buzz. Go ahead and do the hands on the bridge again. There's no pops, buzzing anywhere. Switch back to the bridge pickup. We're going to go ahead and do the same thing. Nope. Alright, so let's go ahead and turn the noise gate back up to the default. And honestly, I'm shocked. There is no ground noise that is coming anywhere off this guitar. Again, I haven't touched this. This is completely stock from the factory. The only thing that I've done is retune the guitar so that I could record what I have been recording. But this is it. So now I've got the JA-20 plugged in and all of the settings are the same. The interface is still set to about 12 o'clock gain. I've reset all of the original settings on the Junkie for the Chunky preset, so it sounds exactly as it did when we test it with the Victory Active. But that also means the noise gate is back on. So let's go ahead and let's peel off the noise gate. And let's see what we're sounding like. Again, I'm hearing a whole lot of nothing. Finger on the strings behind the nut. Fingers on the strings along the neck. Fingers on the bridge. Switch pickups. We're just gonna do the exact same thing. I don't know what you're hearing, but there is no ground noise coming off this guitar. And that's exactly what I was hoping to hear. Let's go ahead and do the same test. We've done the Victory Active. Crank up. Gain on the distortion pedal. Give it the same runs. Finger across the strings of the nut. Finger across the strings. Fretboard. Fingers on the bridge. Switch the pickup. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. All right, let's bring the noise gate back up. We're going to give it a couple of chugs for good measure. This is how the guitar should have been shipped from the factory in the first place. Nice and quiet, a perfectly acceptable amount of noise under a whole lot of gain, and no buzzing, no frustration, just a nice inexpensive guitar with a big old chunky sound. Now, I do feel it's fair to add a disclaimer here, and it's important to note that I don't have a way of guaranteeing that any individual guitar that you may purchase is or isn't going to have this grounding issue. The ones that I received didn't, and while that's a great sign, it is only one sample of a guitar in who knows how many that Thomann has sold. So you do still run the risk of potentially having the grounding issue, and while I hope that Thomann has gotten the message and has addressed the issue for all of the guitars that are going to be shipping out of their factory, there's simply no way for me to confirm whether or not that's going to continue to be the case. All of the guitars I tested for this video arrived in excellent condition, both the original JA-20 that I ordered and the two guitars I'm reviewing here. The only difference that I was able to notice is the original shipped with that sort of waxy white wrapping around it, the almost foamy kind of stuff, and the new guitars I received had a layer of bubble wrap around them instead. I don't know if this is something that Thomann has changed with their guitars recently, but all of the guitars arrived in excellent condition with no signs of wear or damage, so I'm pleased either way. The guitars were also set up quite well, to the point where I didn't have to put in any extra work in order to get them playing at least reasonably comfortably. However, the Victory Active I received does have a significant issue, and that's a buzzing fret. While this isn't representative of the model as a whole, and just came down to the guitar that I received specifically, it does prevent it from playing perfectly over the neck, and if I bend any of those strings at the 9th fret, they do happen to fret out, so it's something that I will need to fix somewhere down the line. If Thomann has gotten their act together though, then it makes the value proposition of these guitars a lot more exciting. The JA-20 is just as much of a beast as the ST-20 is, with a slightly more aggressive body shape and one that works better for players who aren't really into the traditional kind of Strat aesthetic. The Victory Active, on the other hand, caters more towards the classic Gibson style player, who wants something a little slinkier and more vintage in feel, but still wants to turn up the gain and play some heavy modern metal from time to time. And that's what I find these guitars excel at. While all of the body shapes in this budget active line may have been around for a long time, they certainly don't feel like vintage guitars. The necks in particular are very accessible, and while they're certainly not Ibanez thin, or even as thin as the R446 that I've previously reviewed, they're not big chunky baseball bats either. They've got a nice modern shape that tapers off very comfortably towards the heel, they're easy to navigate, and I've been able to play them for very extended periods, whether I'm tracking or just jamming, and my hands are certainly not tired of playing them. The tuning stability on these guitars is also impressive, even with the stock tuners. Usually, these are the first things that I recommend replacing, but in this case, they actually didn't end up too bad. If anything, I'd probably recommend replacing the nut first, especially on the Victory Active. While they're fine for what they're worth, it's not that expensive to get a nice solid replacement, and if you happen to have a luthier nearby who can do the job for you, you could spend maybe 20 bucks on Amazon and upgrade to a graphite or a bone nut that over the long run is going to handle a lot better for you. If you're a stickler about the brand of tuner that's on your guitar though, you can always spend a little bit of extra money and swap them out for some Grovers or Godos just for that extra bit of security, but I don't really see too much need for them at this time. While I've sung the praises of the hipshot style bridge on the JA-20 many times, I'm not quite as convinced about the quality of the Tune-O-Matic bridge on the Victory Active. That's not to say it's necessarily bad, it feels perfectly fine and there aren't any shifting or moving components while I'm playing, but it just doesn't feel as good as the one on the JA-20. And as such, if you're a stickler for the feel of the bridge on your guitar, you may want to consider investing a little extra money and upgrading this component. Fortunately, you can get some fairly inexpensive upgrades on places like Guitar Fetish or Amazon, so you could step up fairly cheap to something like a rolling bridge, which would make tuning stability issues at the bridge a lot less frequent. The most important quality factor for these guitars, though, is the tone. And as I said previously with the ST-20, the HBZ Actives punch well above their weight, especially on guitars that cost so little money. While I do find they're a little bit on the dark side, that is something that can always be fixed with a little bit of pre or post EQ. The neck pickup is smooth enough that you can do all of your guitar acrobatics with it, and the bridge pickup is aggressive and chunky enough that you can get those really tight low-end chugs and have everything punch through really nicely. Remember that these are guitars that, even with shipping to the United States, cost a little bit over $200, which is roughly the same price as a set of EMGs these days. And honestly, you could swap out the pickups in these guitars for a set of EMGs or Blackouts or Fishman Fluences, but you would be doubling the expense that's going into this guitar, and quite frankly, you wouldn't get double the tonal quality out of it. While they are maybe a little bit bland sounding in comparison to something like a Fishman that has a little bit more recognizable of a sound, there's not that much difference, all things considered. And in a mix, I guarantee no one is going to notice the difference whether you're using the stock pickups in here or a $200 set of Fluence Moderns. So one question remains. Would I recommend these guitars to a modern metal player who is looking for something that is going to give them what they want on a budget? The answer? Absolutely. Though it depends on what you're looking for out of your guitar. For my preferences, the JA-20 is the more preferable option, and that's because I've played Strat style guitars for so long that the longer scale length and the more traditional feeling body has more interest to me. I think it holds tune a little bit better, it feels tighter even when you detune the strings courtesy of the longer scale, and ultimately I find it's a more aesthetically appealing guitar. The Victory Active, while it plays just as well and sounds just as mean, is a little bit more specific of a guitar, and that's for a player who wants something that looks just as aggressive as it sounds. It's not necessarily a guitar I would recommend for a bedroom or a studio player, and that's because of the comfort factor. Flying V's are inherently a little bit weird to play, and the extra horns that are inside the V on this body shape makes it ultimately kind of uncomfortable to play sitting for extended periods. If you're looking for a guitar that you're going to play standing up or play live, then this might be a bit of a different story, but if you're just a bedroom player or someone who does a whole lot of studio work and doesn't really travel very much, I would recommend the JA-20 for comfort purposes, if anything. So long as this isn't just a one-off case and the grounding issues are actually resolved, the JA-20 and Victory Active are excellent additions to Harley Benton's budget active line, and guitars I can absolutely recommend for beginning or intermediate metal players who are looking for something that looks mean, plays well, and sounds monstrous on a budget. Honestly, I could recommend these guitars to basically anyone that's not a seasoned and road traveling pro. And that's really impressive for guitars that only cost $200. But I want to know what you think. Do you have any experience with either of these guitars? Do you have some horror stories about grounding issues with your Victory Active? Or better yet, a success story directly from the factory? Do you have any upgrades that you made to these guitars that I may not have suggested here, but you recommend? Let me know in the comment section down below because I would love to hear about your experiences. If anything in this video helped you out or convinced you whether or not to buy this guitar, I recommend leaving a like on this video. Lets me know that you appreciate what I'm doing. And more importantly, if you want more videos like this, be sure to hit the subscribe button down below. However, if you can't wait that long, then I recommend checking out this video right here. I think this will have you covered in the meantime.